Hey guys, how's it going? In this video, I explain how to use the 7-pattern method to play diatonically within a key up and down the whole entire neck of the guitar. Okay? So if you watched my other video, which explained the same thing, how to play in a key diatonically up and down the neck, but that video was using 5 patterns, okay? And then if you watch that video, I also further reduced it to 3 patterns. This particular method uses 7 patterns, and in the last video I showed you how I was actually able to reduce the 5 patterns down to 3 patterns. The reason that it uses 7 patterns is very specific, and I'll get into that, but just know that if you're new at this and you're still stuck playing in just one position of a scale and you're trying to figure out how to apply that scale up and down the entire neck within a key, I recommend following the last method, okay? The 5-position method. You can do this method too, but I believe it's a little bit more complicated. It's more to remember, alright? I think the last one, you may find that it's a little bit more applicable to actually getting out and jam and using it in a much faster time period. And the goal is still the same thing. The goal is to play diatonically within a key over the whole fretboard. But I just think that this method is a little bit more complicated. But anyway, with that said, the 7-pattern method. The reason it has 7 patterns is because there's 7 notes within the major scale, okay? So, we're going to use the G major scale in this video. The last video used the C major scale, which had the relative minor A minor. In this video we're using the G major scale. The only reason I'm using the G major scale for this is because it's easier to start out here and move up the fretboard than it is to start out here and move up the fretboard. So I start out here and move up the fretboard, I start to run out of room. So I'm going to use the G major scale, but it doesn't matter what key I use because the patterns are always going to be the same no matter what key it is, okay? So the pattern for the G major scale is going to look the same if I were to play this in the key of C or if in the key of A or whatever. Okay, so with that said, the major scale has 7 notes in it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then it repeats. Okay, so you can also play the major scale up the neck 7 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then it repeats. Alright, so 7 notes in the major scale played like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a pattern from each one of these notes. So we're going to build a pattern starting on the 3rd fret, then we're going to build a pattern starting on the 5th fret, then a pattern starting on the 7th fret, then 8th, then 10th, then 12th, then 12th, then 14th, then 15th, okay? So 7 patterns. Okay, so before I get into the patterns, I want to be clear on one thing. What I'm showing you today is not modes, okay? We're not talking about modes. I have videos, lessons on modes, but what we're doing is not modes. There's some false information. There's actually a lot of false information you're going to find on the internet explaining that what I'm teaching right now is modes. Now, yes, technically this is where modes come from, but what I'm teaching you is how to play diatonically within a key. Okay, so if you're jamming with a band and they say we're in the key of G major and I use this pattern here and then I move down the fretboard a little bit and use another one of these patterns that I'm about to show you but still using the same notes, I'm still in the key of G major. Okay, if the band is playing, the rhythm section is playing rhythm music that's in the key of G major, I can use all 7 of these patterns which contain the same notes, but I'm still in the key of C major. Okay, I'm not switching modes every time I move to a different spot of the fretboard. That's not how this works. So what I'm showing you is patterns of the diatonic scale, 7 patterns. I'm not showing you modes. If you want to know what modes are, watch the lesson on modes. So with that said, let's get to the first pattern. Okay, so here's your first pattern. All right, so we're using the G major scale for these examples. So the red dot is going to indicate where your note G is within each of these 7 patterns. And just like the last video, the white dot is going to indicate your relative minor tonic note, okay? So every major key has a relative minor. So these patterns can be used for major keys, minor keys, it doesn't matter, it just depends on the location of your tonic note. For more on that, review the last video. I talk a lot more about that in the last video. But for now, just note that the red note is your note G, and your white note is your note E, which is the relative minor of G. So your first pattern is this. We're going to use all 3 note per string patterns. Okay, so that's your first 3 note per string pattern of the G major scale. Okay, here's your second pattern of the G major scale. 3 notes per string. Okay, 3 notes per string. We're still in the key of G major. We're just moving up to the second pattern. Okay, your third pattern here, starting out building this off of the 3rd degree of the G major. Still in the key of G major, your pattern looks like this, 3 notes per string. Okay, we're doing all 3 note per string, all these patterns. So that's the pattern, that's the third pattern. Okay, so here's your pattern number 4. Again, we're still in the key of G major, pattern number 4. Okay, we're still only using the notes of the G major scale. Okay, so here's the 5th position of your diatonic scale in the key of G major. Okay, so here's the 6th position of your diatonic scale in the key of G major. Okay, here's your 7th position of the diatonic scale in the key of G major. And now we're back to the 1st position up here on the 15th fret. Okay, so we started out on the 3rd fret, which was the note G. We built a pattern off of each individual scale degree, which contained the exact same notes of the G major scale, which is G, A, B, C, D, E, and F sharp. And now we're back at G again. So, okay, so again. Okay, so those are your 7 patterns of the diatonic scale. Okay, so that was your 7 positions of the diatonic scale. Alright, so in this case we used the key of G major and we played 7 positions of the G major scale. Now the same thing could be applied to any key. You could have done this using the C major scale. Only your first position would have been located here because your 8th fret is on the low E string is here. This could have been done using the A major scale. Only your first position would be starting on the 5th fret. Okay, that's if you were in the A major scale. This can be done with any of the scales. And also this could be done with any of the minor scales too. You may have noticed that the 6th position of this G major scale looked like a minor scale. Well, it was, because the 6th position of the G major scale is where the minor scale comes from, okay? However, the key that you're soloing in is determined by the rhythm section. So whatever your band is playing, if your band is playing something that sounds like this, okay, if your band's playing that, then it doesn't matter if you're using this pattern up here. Even though it looks like the minor pattern, the minor scale that you may have learned, it doesn't matter. If the band's playing those happy chords, then this scale position up here is really just a position of the G major scale, okay? Alternatively, if your band is playing something like this, okay? If your band's playing something like that, then you're in the key of E minor, okay? In which case, all 7 of those patterns that I just showed you would have been E minor patterns, okay? The location of your tonic note would have changed within those patterns. Okay, so this would have been your new number 1, okay, because that's where your E is located on the low E string, okay? But these are still, these 7 patterns work for major and minor keys, okay? As I showed you in each of the diagrams, if you're in a major key, then your red note is your tonic note, okay? That's the major key tonic note. If you're in a minor key, any of the 7 patterns would have worked, only you would have been focusing around your white note being the tonic note within each of the 7 patterns, okay? So any key, major, minor, doesn't matter. Alright, I go into this a lot more in the other video that I made, the 5 positions of the diatonic scale. So if you're still not sure about this, check that out, and also check out the relative minor concept video, the relative major, relative minor, that explains this too. I keep reiterating the same thing, but just in case you haven't seen those other videos, check those out. And also, again, these are not modes. I did not do modes today. I did patterns of the major scale / patterns of the minor scale. Alright? Modes are a different video, so if you want to learn about modes, check out the videos on modes. So that's about that for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks.